What is it in your life that you are a beginner at? You know, it's all too easy to, in the first half of life, in that fixed mindset of proving, put all of our energy and attention and focus on doing things that we're good at. But I knew deep down, I knew that it was an opportunity for me to tell a part of my story that I had never talked about publicly. And that was that I had been suffering with severe depression. My why for this podcast is I learned through that experience that vulnerability, authenticity breed connection. Welcome to the inaugural episode of the Safe to Be Seen podcast. My name is Brandon Burke. This is my wife, Darci. Thanks for being here, Darci. So good to have you as my co-host on this episode of Safe to Be Seen. So, this week I stumbled upon a reel on my Instagram feed that was really profound, really influential for me. It was from the Rich Roll podcast, and he was interviewing Chip Connolly. And Chip Connolly, he said something that really impacted me that I'd like to share, if that's okay. He said, one of the most important things to having a fulfilling, exciting second half of life is to get out of the fixed mindset of proving that we have in the first half of life and get into the growth mindset of improving. And he talks about how, one of the definitions of improving and therefore success is learning, right? And he said that one of his favorite things to do is to, when he meets new people, is to ask them this question. What is it in your life right now that you are a beginner at? Because he talked about how, it's all too easy to, in the first half of life, in that fixed mindset of proving, put all of our energy and attention and focus on doing things that we're good at, familiar with, basically playing games that we know we're going to win. And shifting that focus into more of a growth mindset of, instead of proving, improving. And, he talks about how that means getting out of your comfort zone a little bit and maybe doing new things. So, Darci, I would ask you, what in your life at this time are you a beginner at?
Yeah, I love that question. But first of all, hey, babe.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
This is exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say that starting this podcast with you is a new beginning. This is something that we're creating, and it's something that's new. It's something we've never done before. It's a new beginning for us. So that's a huge one.
Yeah.
And speaking of the word creating, create is my word for 2025. I started, instead of setting out yearly goals, I just decided to land on a word that I could focus on for the year. And I've done that for the past couple years, and I really liked it. So my word for this year is create. So, starting this podcast with you. And then I'm in the process of writing a book that we'll hopefully share later on the podcast with the person that I'm writing it with. And so that's something that's new for me. I've never done that before, and it's uncomfortable and it's scary, and I'm learning so much by doing it. And it's I think creation is just a way for our souls to manifest love, and creation is just a manifestation of our love. And I love thinking about like creation in that way. So when I think about new beginnings, I think about just like creating and creation. And so, yeah, those are things that I'm in the middle of new beginnings of. And yeah, I'm going to flip that question back at you. What's a new beginning for you?
First of all, I'm so proud of you. You mentioned the book that you're working on, and I'm so excited to see that come to life. So proud of you.
Thank you.
And I won't reveal all of, you have a lot of new beginnings going on right now. So
I do.
That was a good one to pick though. Thank
It'll
you
come.
for sharing that. Yeah. We'll get to the other ones.
Yeah.
Well, for me, you know, I recently discovered that I can dance.
I know.
I had no idea.
I've seen it.
I had no clue. And we'll get to all of this in future episodes, but you know, old me was so fearful of what I looked like, the judgment of others and how I appeared. And I recently, you know, let that go, and just my body just started moving in ways that I had no idea it could. And anyway, this last weekend, I was fortunate enough to attend the AC/DC concert in Las Vegas. Oh my gosh, it was so unbelievable. I went with my brother and a couple of buddies, and you know, I've been to several concerts in the past, and I was pretty content just sitting, sometimes standing, maybe occasionally clapping, you know.
A little sway side to side.
Sway side to side, maybe a little bit. Babe, this concert was 3 hours long. I danced the entire time.
I love it.
I danced for 3 hours straight. And my brother and my buddies, I think, were like, what is going on? Who is this guy? But I just, you know, I just kind of flowed, just kind of did what my body wanted to do. And it was so fun. Anyway.
That's awesome.
That's kind of a new beginning for me. Dancing has never been something that I've been comfortable doing, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just a couple weekends ago, we did a little fire out back at our house with our kids. And we've recently all together as a family too kind of gotten us into exploring different types of instruments and drums. And so that's been so fun. That's like a new beginning for our family too, is like exploring these musical instruments that we haven't before. And, you know, and then me and you started getting up and dancing around the fire. And I thought our kids were going to be like, you guys are so weird. What are you doing? But they didn't even say anything.
Yeah.
It was just like, yeah, well, that's what we do.
Yeah.
But it's such a fun way to express and like kind of like return back to like childlike states, you know, which we should all be doing all the time. So
yeah. Well, in fact, that's what when I was at the concert, you know, AC/DC was a very influential band for me especially a teenager, I would say. A lot of their songs were like our hype songs for sports, you know? Mm-hmm. And, you know, back then I was too cool. I was, you know, I know now I was afraid. I was scared to express in a way like that, like dancing or moving my body. And at the concert, I kind of took myself back to my teenage self, the teenage version of me. And I just kind of allowed all of that suppressed and pent up expression that like teenage Brandon never got to express, never had the courage or safety to express. I let it out that night, and it was so fun.
It's awesome. I love it. I wish I was there to have seen it, but I've seen you dance. It's pretty incredible. Maybe one of these times you can dance on the podcast.
Maybe
show us your moves.
We'll see. All right. Well, you know, we thought that for today's first episode, it would be appropriate for us to state our intentions for doing this podcast. So basically, Darci and I are going to take a few moments and each of us individually express to you, the listener, why are we doing this? Why is it that we would talk so openly and publicly about some things that are very vulnerable? And in order for, I think, the listener to really understand that, for me, Darce, it's important for me. I go back to an experience I had 2 years ago when I was invited to be on a podcast called the 1090 podcast, hosted by Mason Sawyer. If you are not familiar with that podcast, I would recommend you check it out. But Mason invited me to be on as a guest on that podcast because he was very interested in me telling a story, the part of my journey at that point in my life that had to deal with, well, at that time, we had recently sold what we thought was our dream house. Mm-hmm. We had spent, years designing first and then building what we thought was our dream house. It was an incredible home. It was beautiful. And after living in it for 2 short years, we sold it and we downsized significantly. And Mason wanted to know about that. He wanted to pick my brain and understand what was going on there, like the philosophical change in my life. And I realized just honestly, right before airing, or I should say recording, right before recording that episode with Mason, I realized that in order for me to tell that story in its entirety and have it make sense to the listener, it was really not about so much like selling our dream home, but I knew deep down, I knew that it was an opportunity for me to tell a part of my story that I had never talked about publicly. Mm. And that was that I had been suffering with severe depression. At that time, this podcast was recorded and aired 2 years ago, May of 2023. So at that time, I had been suffering with severe depression for several years, 3, 4, maybe 5 years, something in there. Mm-hmm. And I had been highly medicated on 3 antidepressants for 3 or 4 of those years. And, I just, what was going on, and it was buried so deep in my subconscious, but I had been working so hard, expending so much of my energy, my focus, my attention on doing, on achieving, on performing, on obtaining. And, that started, I could go back to, in my youth and in my teenage years, and even, in high school and in college, it was athletics. I found a great deal of success in athletics, and then kind of became my Mormon mission. I had a lot of success as a Mormon missionary. Mm-hmm. And then after my mission, it became achievement in academics as I started down the academic path of working to, become an orthodontist, 10 years of schooling for that, making sure that I was, highly successful in that regard. And then after that, it was in my orthodontic practice and in building my orthodontic practice. And what happened was, And again, this was all, I just thought I was a hard worker. I thought I was very ambitious, very driven. And when the house is just a symbol, that dream house that we sold and all that, it was just a symbol. It was a very important representation for me of what was going on. But, it was as if I was climbing this really, really tall ladder. Each rung of the ladder represented by different achievements, different accomplishments in my life. And when I reached the top of that ladder, this really, really tall ladder, represented by kind of being at the top of where I could get in my career and in what the world would define as being successful, having toys, having a nice house. I had a beautiful life, an amazing, beautiful wife, talented, wonderful children, healthy children, a great career. But I was like empty inside. I felt so unfulfilled when I reached the very top of that really tall ladder. It was as if I realized that it was leaning up against the wrong wall the entire time. And when I realized there really wasn't anything else for me to go after, to achieve, to obtain, to do. And I felt that emptiness, that pain manifesting as, depression. Because I just kept thinking, well, my depression will get better, if I get the next thing, if I make more money, if I build a bigger house, or whatever it was. And when I kind of had it all, when I kind of was at the cliff top or the top of the ladder, and I still felt that way, that was a hard fall. That was my rock bottom. And I wanted to express that. I expressed that in that podcast. I talked all about that, about how I had been depressed, and I thought that achieving and performing and obtaining and doing was going to help make me feel better. And it just never did. And, I had to talk, I didn't have to, I wanted to talk about how I had suicidal thoughts, I was in a really dark place. Anyway, after the podcast aired, I was approached by several men who were friends of mine who thought that they knew me pretty well, but they had no idea about that side of me. They had no idea that I had been depressed, that I had suffered in that way, and even, had problems with, suicidal ideation, and they had no idea that I was on antidepressants or any of that stuff. And a lot of these men that reached out, they started reaching out to me, and they started wanting to talk more, and they wanted to go to lunch. They wanted to go to breakfast. They wanted to discuss my story in more depth. And, prior to this occasion of these men reaching out to me and wanting to talk more, I had lived a life really just so focused on my achievement, on my doing, on my performing. And for other reasons that we'll get into in future episodes. But I had like this heart that was kind of boarded up, kind of encased in this, how I envision it was like this really thick steel box. Like I was not going to let anyone in too close. Like I just kept people at arm's length. But when these men started reaching out to me, and I started like after my podcast aired and I was vulnerable and people started hearing and knowing a little bit more about me, and then they wanted to talk more about it, I started connecting with these men. An amazing thing happened that I had really not fully experienced before. And that was, I started to feel connection with these men. Mm-hmm. And I realized that the connection I was creating and feeling with these men was sourced in the vulnerability that I was giving and in living authentically. Mm. And it was such a beautiful realization, an awareness that I gained through that experience. And so I would say that my why for this podcast, like my main intention for doing this, is I learned through that experience that vulnerability, authenticity breed connection. Mm-hmm. And that connection is one of the most important parts of this life, and actually a human need. Mm. And, it's really, really important, as I've learned from then until now. A lot has happened in 2 years, and we'll get into all that in future episodes about how this healing journey progressed for me and how I overcame the depression and many other things. But ultimately I learned, Darci, that when we feel safe within ourselves, we're able to connect more deeply to ourselves. We're therefore able to connect more deeply to others. Mm-hmm. And life becomes so much richer, so much more meaningful, so much more fulfilling. And I'm so grateful for my rock bottom, because it showed me, it was as if my soul reached down and was shaking me awake. And it was hard. And that was kind of the start. That rock bottom was kind of the beginning of a very, very difficult, agonizing, painful, but beautiful and triumphant journey. Mm. And so I would say ultimately my why for this podcast is I want to help people get from where I was to where I am now. Which by no means mean I'm not claiming to have all the answers. I haven't arrived anywhere. It's a journey. There is no destination to reach. But I do believe that I and we have discovered some really important tools and truths that have enriched our lives tremendously and increased the depth of our connection to self and to each other, to our children, to other human beings. Mm-hmm. And I'm just very, very honored and grateful to have the opportunity to share some of that. Mm. What would you say, Darci, is your why for the podcast? What is an intention or multiple intentions perhaps for you in doing this?
Well, first, thank you, babe. That was so well put and so heartfelt. Like I could just feel that so deeply. And, in speaking of my intention for this podcast, it's bounces off a lot of your experience because, our theme of safety be seen, of having a felt sense of safety with inside yourself, because you can cognitively say, what safety is, but having a felt sense of that inside your body completely changes your entire experience. And so my intention with this podcast is to talk about like, what does that mean and what does that feel like and how does that change your life to have a felt sense of safety within yourself. And that by so doing, when you feel safe within your body, when you feel when you see yourself, then you feel safer to see others. And then you see it. And by so doing, I feel like that's like the healing balm for the world, because that is so desperately needed, is that concept of really seeing yourself, but then really seeing other human beings. That breeds so much more compassion and empathy. And so my intention with this podcast is, to help spread awareness about how important that concept is. And, just a little bit about how I discovered that felt sense of safety within myself. I mean, it started with, kind of like as your wife, seeing you go through and experiencing depression. And, it was heartbreaking. It was so hard to see you suffer that way. And I'm so thankful for like pharmaceuticals that helped you get through a really difficult time. But I think we both were getting to a point of like, there has to be more to this. There has to be more to healing. And, because it was just kind of numbing you from everything, And alongside that, I have had experiences with seeing a lot of like people experiencing a lot of hardship in their life. And so I was like having these different experiences with seeing people go through really, really difficult things, And so I have always had this like strong desire to help people. And so when you were going through that, and also at a time in my life when I was healing from some things that we'll get into, I started just one day, like was doing all this research on trying to like researching different modalities of healing. And I came across somatics and the nervous system. And it just spoke to me so deeply. It was like, I can't even explain what that experience was like. It was like, yeah, this is it. This is like what you need, Darci. And so I went and got certified in a bunch of different modalities and applications when it comes to the nervous system and the body. And now I coach and help people kind of like reclaim themselves and heal from trauma and just from life in general. And it's been such a gift to be able to be in that space with people, of that healing space, and helping people understand like there's a reason why you are the way that you are. Like there's an actual science to it, and seeing people like discover that when I educate people about like the nervous system and why they are the way that they are. I've seen so many people just kind of like pause and get really emotional and just be so grateful for that realization of like, there's a reason why I am this way and there's a way out of it, and it's just been such an incredibly beautiful experience. And I think that this message is so important. I think all healing spaces are powerful and important, but this creating more spaces of healing and of understanding what healing looks and feels like, I think is so needed and so important right now. I think there's a lot of healing going on right now, individually and collectively, and which I love to see, because it's needed. And people, I think, right now are realizing that, we've been a culture that has been so deeply entrenched in the cognitive space, and this isn't like in my attempt at like disregarding the benefits of talk therapy, because they're deep and they're so helpful and they're so useful. Both you and I have benefited from that. But, with all of our medical advancements and all the years of talk therapy, like we have to get honest about like has anxiety and depression rates continue to increase, you know? And I believe, and along with so many other people, and the research is showing that it's because the body needs to be involved in that process and an understanding of the nervous system. And I think for both of us, that's how we've found a lot of of true healing, because it wasn't until like I started involving the body in my healing did I really find like a resolution within myself, like a full resolution. And I think this concept of like feeling safe to be seen, especially when I think about like our kids and about just like kids in general, of how helpful and useful it will be for them if we as parents can educate our kids and teach them like what that actually means to feel safe inside their bodies as they're growing up. Because honestly, like a lot of the people that I help in my business, in my space, is because they don't know how to feel safe in their bodies. And they don't know how to safe to feel emotion and to experience life in their bodies. And if we could like teach that to our kids of what does that mean to feel safe in your body as you're growing up and as you're experiencing an emotion and you're experiencing hard things and you're seeing hard things happen in the world, you know? So I just think it's such a profound, like an important message to spread about this concept of feeling safe in your body. And also what you spoke to earlier about living authentically and feeling safe to be authentic. It's so needed in this world. I think people are craving authenticity and craving realness. And, so I really am so excited to help spread this message of feeling safe to be seen and safe to see others. And, my hope is that this space will provide hope, will provide healing, will provide connection as we talk about like real, raw human experiences, as we interview people about their raw human experiences and helping them feel safe to do so. And collectively, I think that is just going to help people be able to feel and give and receive more love. That's my hope. So I'm so excited.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. That's a great intention. Thank you. And may I just say that your healing journey has been so beautiful to witness. Thank you.
Thanks,
for
babe.
letting me witness it. And to see you blossom and to come into your authenticity and your coming home to yourself and discovering your gifts, one of which is as a somatics and nervous system practitioner. What a beautiful gift you are.
Thank you.
You've been so helpful to me and to many others in their healing journeys. So thank you.
Thanks, babe.
Yeah. In addition to our own individual intentions and the why behind this podcast, we have some mutual intentions as well. Some shared intentions. And I think one of those is to provide a safe space for people who may be needing a soft landing for a transition, a big transition going on in their life. Mm-hmm. For some, it may be divorce or the end of maybe another very important, meaningful relationship. For some, it may be a midlife crisis, or what Dr. James Hollis calls the middle passage. It could be all sorts of different transitions in life. For us also, it was leaving a high demand religion, Mormonism, which was very, very unexpected I mean, you and I never could have imagined that we would ever leave the Mormon church.
No.
And, you know, I, in particular, I don't know so much you, but I had a very significant middle passage or midlife crisis. Part of which was my faith transition and my leaving the Mormon church. And we want to provide a safe space for people to, you know, who may be experiencing some of the things that we experienced in that transition, which some of those things we experienced were significant grief, pain, because it's leaving the Mormon church, it's not like, for us, it wasn't something, again, like I said, we would have never expected it, but it also wasn't something that we wanted to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
No.
It just happened. And when it happened, and our entire belief system kind of crumbled, with that crumbled our identity. Our identity was so wrapped in tightly with the church and with that belief system that we had to reconstruct not only, our beliefs around spirituality, but we had to reconstruct every part of our lives, right? We had to reconstruct our relationship to self. We had to start walking down the path of self-discovery and figure out, who are we? We had to reconstruct our relationship with each other, our marriage, our relationship to, with our kids, with every part of our life. And it was a very difficult process, very painful, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, no claiming here that we have all the answers. We simply want to tell our story. We want to share some things that we have learned. We want to provide a safe space for others to do the same. But Darci, what would you like to add in that regard, as it pertains to that huge transition in our life of leaving Mormonism and kind of the ramifications of that and how that impacted or fit into our evolution and our healing journey?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, like you spoke to earlier, there's several avenues that people go down of this process of like unbecoming to like become who you really are. And religion isn't the only avenue that people go down in order to kind of like go through that reclamation process. But for us, like that was the avenue that we had to experience, that we got to experience actually, to be able to like reclaim ourselves and come home to ourselves, as we so often like to say. And it was incredibly painful. It was so hard. And, this isn't our attempt to like, this is not a podcast about Mormonism or leaving Mormonism, but more about like how we build ourselves back up when something like that happens. And I think through the experience that we had from leaving, and then also just like hearing so many people's experiences with leaving Mormonism has been so hard and so painful, the pain that is involved with that. And so yeah, we want to provide a space for people to be able to listen and hopefully be able to relate and connect and know that there's hope and healing. And also, I think, we've talked about this, that we hope that by telling our story and by showing like how we've been able to like rebuild ourselves and reclaim ourselves and actually have like, I mean, our connection is deeper. Our connection with our kids is deeper. Like it's been so beautiful. Where have we been able to come with that? And we hope that provides people hope who may be feeling lost or feeling so confused or like, where do we even start? What do we even do? You know? And I hope also too that believing members can, if they choose to listen, can gain a better understanding of maybe how they can help their loved ones if they are going through something like this. Because our message here is just love and healing. And how do we help both sides of the coin heal from something like this? Because, you know, you're so deeply integrated with each other in this process, your family. And it's just unnecessary. And so we hope that even if believing members choose to listen, that they'll be able to find ways that they can help their loved ones, if they're going through a process like this, feel loved and to feel like they're not being judged, and so that healing can happen, you know? Unfortunately, leaving Mormonism sometimes can rupture relationships. It can even cause divorce. It causes separation between family members. We just want to provide a space for people to be able to come, to be able to listen to how we were able to transition and kind of build ourselves back up from that and reclaim ourselves and, feel safe to be seen in who we are, safe to seen in our, where we're at now in our authenticity. And it's been so hard, but it has been like so beautiful. Like coming home to myself and really like having a better understanding of like who I am and what I really believe and how I really feel about spirituality and feel about everything actually has been so liberating and fun and exciting. And I've really come to understand like what it really feels like to feel like connected to myself and really know myself. And that's helped me feel so much more connected to you. And like I said, to our kids and, you know, to humanity. And we want to provide a healing space for people maybe going through something similar, and also for their families who may be struggling with kids or parents leaving. I mean, our situation, it was our kids, like me and you, having to go to our kids and tell them like our beliefs have changed. Mm-hmm. You know, it wasn't the other way around. And that was so hard. Yeah. You know, and so there's just a lot of healing that needs to happen in this space. And so we come with love and hope for both sides, you know?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. So, yeah, I loved how you said, you know, this is not a podcast about Mormonism in regards to, like, we have no interest in discussing in detail the whys of our exit, or we have no interest in any negativity. We highly respect all people and all of their beliefs. Mm-hmm. I like to say, as a kind of parenthetically, as long as there's no harm done.
Yeah.
I highly respect everyone's beliefs as long as there's no harm done. But that said, you know, it is a significant part of our journey. Mm-hmm. I mean, we would not be where we're at without having gone through that. And so we will be touching on it discussing parts of that journey. And in fact, our next episode, tune in. We will talk a little bit more in detail about how our leaving Mormonism impacted our healing journey, and how that was all, how that all went down. So, anything else you want to add?
No, I think that's a great start. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
You're a great co-host.
You're amazing.
You're really fun to look at.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thank you. Well, we thank you, the listener, for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. We invite you to tune in to the next episode, and we can't wait to talk to you more about our life's journey. And we hope that you feel safe to be seen. Thank you.